Okay, we'll go ahead and get started. We're going to be ready to begin. Today is February 1st, 2022 study session in regards to the Planning Commission. I know we have on Zoom multiple members of City Hall, including Gary Miyake, our attorney, and I believe Rick Watland is on from the Building Department and the Planning Commission. So, Gary, is he on yet?
Yeah, I'm in.
Okay.
I'm on. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. All right, I don't know if you just want me to start and
So let me give a synopsis to the audience as far as what we're doing here. This particular study session was to just bring everybody up to date as far as what's going on with the Planning Commission in general, as far as the protocols that should be followed on the Planning Commission and on City Council, as far as both entities working together for the betterment of the city and for the benefit of the residents. And there was also some questions amongst some council members in terms of, you know, which things that are voted on by the Planning Commission have to come back to City Council for final approval. So because there were a lot of questions and a lot of vagueness and a lot of unsuredness, if there's such word, we figured we would do this so that we could clarify everything for us as a City Council body and know what we can and cannot and will or will not vote on, and in addition to that for the Planning Commission so that they could be more clear as far as what is or is not sent to us. Initially, the Planning Commission is not going to be here because we're going to make a clarification specifically to the City Council with our Councilor Gary Miyake and some members of the Planning Commission and our City Engineer, and then from there, if we have to, we'll go to the Planning Commission. So, Councilor Gary Miyake, you can go ahead and get us started if you don't mind. If you could, before you start, give, and I'm always big on that, give the general audience listening, whether on TV or in person, a general idea of what the Planning Commission is, what their general responsibilities are, and then we'll go ahead and go from there as far as some of the questions and some of the ambiguities to get them cleared up. Thank you.
Okay. Well, basically all authority over zoning matters is given to us as a city by the state. And it does so through the Michigan Zoning Enabling Act. And the zoning, I'll just refer to it as the Act. The Act basically allows the city ordinance to indicate how it is that certain powers are going to be delegated to what legislative bodies, whether it's the City Council or so on and so forth. So the Planning Commission has the following authority given to it under the zoning ordinance. First of all, in terms of the zoning ordinance, it basically is the body that is supposed to be involved in the formulation of the initial zoning ordinance, formulation, review, and recommendation of amendments to the zoning ordinance, hold hearings on a proposed zoning ordinance or amendments, report its findings and recommendations concerning the zoning ordinance or amendments to the City Council. It's supposed to give an annual report. It's supposed to do site plan approvals. And site plans are basically the documents that are used to determine what's supposed to happen at a particular site, and including conditions and so on and so forth. And the Planning Commission is not only supposed to review site plans, but is also supposed to make determinations and approve them subject to any conditions or deny them. The Planning Commission is also supposed to be responsible for holding hearings, reviewing, and making determinations to approve or deny applications for special uses or special land use. Sometimes we hear about these. And they can also approve them subject to conditions. They have the ability to review conditional rezoning requests. Ultimately, the City Council has the authority to end up approving or denying conditional rezoning requests. And on planned unit developments, think about, for example, when you end up having a general area where you're trying to have a lot of interlinked standards. This is what it sounds like in terms of the what's going on the Van Born corridor is that type of planned development. They review those types of things, namely the Planning Commission does. Ultimately, the City Council approves that. The Planning Commission is also designated to perform duties having to do with the master plan. It can be given other duties, and all of its meetings have to be handled pursuant to the Act, the Zoning Enabling Act. So it has quite a few of the powers and authority relative to zoning issues under the city's ordinance. And in comparison to, say, the City Council, which basically the City Council adopts the zoning ordinance, reviews and approves planned development and conditional rezoning proposals, sets fees, and approves Planning Commission members. So you can see there are like 4 things that the City Council is supposed to do, but the Planning Commission has quite a few things that it's supposed to end up doing.
Okay. And then quick question again, just for clarification in the audience, because it's a common question that I hear all the time by residents. So for the residents' sake, if you don't mind, just to briefly, what is the difference between the Planning Commission, which is what we're going to review today, and then the Zoning Commission? What is the difference for a resident between zoning and planning? And then from there, what I'm going to do, I'm sorry,
Board of Appeals?
Zoning Board of Appeals, not taxes. We're not talking about taxes. The Zoning Board, not taxes.
Okay.
So
Right.
just a
The
general
zoning
description. Then after that, Gary, I'm going to go. We are blessed to have on our council here a former member of the Planning Commission, Councilman Tom Wenzel. I'm going to have him start after you finish with just a general idea on the Zoning Commission. As far as the things that have been of concern, so go ahead, Gary.
Okay. So the ZBA is really designed to deal with issues where there is a difficulty in applying the ordinance, the zoning ordinance as envisioned. Usually there have to be practical difficulties or hardships. And so they deal with variances from the ordinance. So for example, someone has an oddly configured lot. The ordinance doesn't apply very well to them. They may have practical difficulties because they have nowhere to, for example, park. They come to the Zoning Board of Appeals, and the Zoning Board of Appeals sees if the standards are met for a variance to be granted. But the Planning Commission doesn't deal with those issues. They still deal with more precise, specific issues having to do with specific property, but they don't deal with those types of issues. And then the council deals with more, political, broad-based policy issues as opposed to specific issues in terms of the property. At least that's the way it currently is under the ordinance.
Thank you very much, Gary. Much appreciated. At this particular point, Councilman Tom Wenzel, I know you had brought up this question, so I'm going to go ahead and start the meeting with your concern, because this is the primary reason that we are here today. So if you don't mind, but again, to everyone in the audience and council members, make sure the microphone is as close as possible to you so that members of Zoom can fully understand you. Go ahead.
Thank you, Council Chair. Just another brief example of what the Planning Commission did or does when I was on the Planning Commission for 15 years. We would get a set of plans from an applicant. Just theoretically, if someone wanted to build a 7-Eleven on Ford Road, and they'd give us the plans. We would turn a set of plans over to the fire marshal to make sure that everything was okay with them as far as sprinkler systems, room for a fire engine to go around the building, different things like that would concern the fire marshal. And then once that got okay, then we would look at the plans and see if there was enough parking spaces for that particular business according to our ordinances. if it had a drive-through, if we had enough stacking, cars that line up in the drive-through, if there's enough spaces for that, if the off-street parking was available, and like the council said, if there was an issue with, say, if it was in a zoned area that was close to another one, and someone wanted a variance, say, hey, we're right in a M1 zone or C2 zone, but we want to be something else classified, it'd be turned over to zoning. And then the planning commission would look at all these factors, and then have the council, the legal counsel, which was Mark Roberts, I think he still is there, he would look at everything that we would talk about and see if it was legal, because if a business wanted to, a person wanted to put a business in a specific place and there was nothing illegal about it, we would have to actually give them permission to do that, unless we could come up with a reason not to. You know, so, say a residential area group would come and protest it, and they'd have petitions, things of that nature.
Okay, but what were the things that were of concern to you that you felt that we had gone away from there as a city, from the way it had been previously done in previous years when you first started on the planning commission to most recently?
I was just getting to that. What we would do is we would go through all these factors, and we would determine as a commission whether we thought it was a good idea or a legal idea for this business to be there, and then we would take a vote on it, and if it was voted yes, we would make a recommendation to City Council to approve this site plan. And if we didn't like it, we would recommend to City Council a denial, or we would approve it with conditions to City Council for them to make the final decision. And that's the only way it went in the 15 years I was on the Planning Commission. I can't remember one time where we said we approved this unconditionally without having to go to City Council. There was a few matters as far as once it was approved, they came back to us with a couple changes that we could approve, but the overall site plan had to be final approved by City Council.
Okay. Now, I'm sorry, was somebody saying something?
Yeah, Council Chair, I was just going to point out, I spoke to Councilman Muscat, and he had that same concern, and I had indicated that I would mention that at today's meeting since he's not able to attend.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
So, no, it's okay. So on that, and before we go to you, Gary, because I would like to go to you, we have to follow, obviously, whatever the official protocol is, whatever the rules are, and that's what we'll all follow. So if it's been, for whatever we missed, we'll go right back to it. With that being the case, I'm going to want to speak with our building director, Rick Watland, get his input on this, because I know he's at the Planning Commission meetings. And then in the event, our engineer, Mr. Ali Deeb, just get his input on this too. And then we'll get to a clarification as far as what the right protocols is, and we'll just start following them from hence forward. Make sure we're doing following the rules, basically. So Rick, if you don't mind, I know me and you had a phone conversation, and you had some concerns, and I'd like you to address them, please.
Good evening. Most of those that have to be approved by council is only if there's a zoning change. So if it's a C3 commercial area, the Planning Commission can approve it, it can be built. But if we're going from residential to commercial, council has to approve the zoning change.
Okay.
But other than that, it should go right through.
Now, you also mentioned a couple of items I wrote down at the time we had the phone call. Drive-throughs, you said would have to be approved by council, car dealerships.
Yep.
And then alleys. Now, I presume on car dealerships, that's based on if there's a zoning change. Is that correct?
Right, because when we made that ordinance that car dealers had to be 1,000 feet, they also put in there that council had to approve.
Final approval on any car dealership that opens up in the city.
And also with drive-throughs, that council had to do the final approval.
Sure, absolutely.
But if it's allowed in that area, the Planning Commission can approve it. But most of them change, like Ford Road went from residential to commercial to general business. So that should have came for just the zoning change from C3, CX to C3.
And you also mentioned, Rick, alleys would have to be approved by city council.
Yep, because that's a zoning change.
That's vacating of alleys for those that are not familiar. So vacating of an alley would be if there's an existing alley and it's going to be split up to the business behind it, we as a council would have to give final approval on that. Was there anything else on your end beyond those four that you feel are ones that are mandatory to be finally approved by us, or anything above and beyond that?
I don't think so.
Okay, so I'm going to go to Ali Deeb next, if you don't mind, Councilman Moby Dune,
Sure.
and then there's a question from Councilman Moby Dune. Gary, before we go to Ali Deeb, Gary, did you have anything to add in regards to what
I
we were
was
speaking
just
of?
going to clarify, actually,
Please.
an alley vacation
Go
is
ahead.
not really a zoning issue. Just to clarify that, sorry.
Okay, so when I spoke with Rick Watland, he had mentioned that when there's a vacating of an alley, it'd have to be approved by, oh, you're saying it would not go in front of the planning commission anyways? Is that what you're saying, Gary?
It's not really a zoning issue per
Okay,
se.
so it would not go in front of
It's-
planning, it would go in front of council only? Okay,
That's
It's more if we close it for a building or
Oh, I
something like that, then it gets sent to council.
to
Sorry about
the
that.
planning. It gets sent
It
to
goes
the
to
planning
planning,
first,
then
and
to
then the
you guys.
council. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you, Rick. Thank you, Gary. At this point, I want a little input, if you don't mind, from our our engineer, city engineer,
Yes,
Ali
sir,
Deeb,
sure.
please, go ahead.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Good. So as Mr. Miyake and Mr. Watland indicated, that's basically the current process. That's what we do. The only add I like to include is that there are a set of standards. When the Planning Commission review a project, they're looking for those standards. Case in point, the apartments on Warren Avenue across from the golf course, the standard height was required, so there was a variance. They asked them to go to zoning, and zoning looked at the process, and we attended it, and they gave them a variance. Instead of a 12 feet, you go 11, because the overall height will be, will be too much for the area. So these are the things that the zoning and the planning commission deal with on day-to-day basis. So again, the main issues that you're looking for, that you wanted to come before the board, if you wanted to get every project to council, then that's really, it's up to you to decide what needs to go to council.
Sure. And I tell you, I can speak for myself, not as a body. I would not want everything to go through council, because at that particular point, you have the potential for a resident to go through zoning and then go through the planning commission, which, by the way, to get on the planning commission, you need a 30-day notice. So you're going to go to zoning, which I think 2 or 3, maybe 4 weeks notice, and then go in front of zoning, and then 1 month, 30 days notice to get on the planning commission, and then be on the planning commission 30 days later, and then they kick it back on everything back to us as a council. That would be too burdensome for the average resident. I think it's too much. We want to get rid of, I know per our mayor's direction, he wants to get rid of as much of the red tape as possible to keep it nice, smooth, and simple for residents in case they want to do any type of business. And he's nodding his head, so I know he's in agreement. Councilman Moby Dune, go ahead.
So I just have a couple of things.
Bring your microphone to yours.
I'm so sorry. Hello. And this is to our corporation counsel, Gary. Gary, is this a ordinance that can be changed, or is this in the charter that states what the position of the planning commission does?
It's an ordinance.
Okay, so
The charter, there is a charter provision, but the charter provision doesn't specify what the duties are. Moreover, the Zoning Enabling Act is really the piece of legislation we need to be mindful of.
okay. And you know what? I will say that I've went to, I believe, a couple of planning commission meetings. I know that when you go in front of the planning commission, every time a new business comes before the planning commission or adopts to try to do so, it's $500 per visit.
Right.
And so, I know it's a process, and kind of like the mayor and Dave Abdullah said, a lot of the red tape and the approach on that, it's got to be an easier process. And I think if you have to jump through so many hoops, you got to speak to your planning and then zoning, and then you got to come to council. What's the whole point of having a planning commission? Might as well eliminate the planning commission and just have everything go to council then in that case. but the committee is there for that reason. So that's just my concerns on that. Thank you.
Council Chair?
Yeah, if I may, Council, oh, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, go
No,
ahead, Mr. Mayor.
I'm going to let Gary finish his, go ahead, Gary, and then the mayor will be next. Go ahead, Gary.
Okay. Thank you. And I think this is the reason why the ordinance was adopted the way it was, because there's a lot of kind of details that need to end up being gone through when it comes to planning issues. You know, you can end up having a public hearing that goes on for quite some time. And, you know, the details really matter, because ultimately at the end of the day, these decisions, even though they involve some judgment, often are straight up legal issues, and they'll be challenged as such. They're not political decisions. So when you add in another step in the process, you potentially end up making it that much more difficult for the applicants in terms of having to have, you know, initially go over to the building department, then go to the planning commission, then go to the city council. So you're cutting down on the amount of process, but you're also having decisions made by a group that's just focused on the standards, or supposed to be focused just on the standards that apply. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Gary. At this point, we're going to move to our mayor. Go ahead, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Council Chair. And as mentioned, I mean, anytime you, obviously, you know, we have the map at the City Hall that actually shows the zone, different zoning for the whole entire city per street. So one of the things that we wanted to do, and, you know, some of the concerns that I've received to the last year, you know, since being in that position, is, you know, also that was mentioned, $500 every time they go in front of the commission. So they cannot pass something at that point, you know, they can just reject it, and every time they come back, they have to pay that amount. So that's one of the biggest issues that we've had in the past. And, you know, when I talked about red tape, so that's one of the red tapes. So the other thing is, when I brought in an engineer to the city, obviously the city's never had a city engineer that looked at the interest of the city. And what was done in the past, every time you go in front of, let's say you get $500 fee for, you know, anybody that wants to deviate from the process, we'll just say that. So they pay the $500. So then you pay for an attorney to be there. You know, even if you have one case at that night, you know, excuse me, no offense to the lawyers, sorry, but so you're paying a certain amount for the attorney to be there. Even if they listen to one case, you still gotta pay for that amount
For a couple hours,
there,
correct.
yeah. So in addition to that, you have a consultant that is there, and also that consultant's actually making more money than the attorney. You know, you're paying. So for an item, you can say, like, you know what, I'm going to put, let's say, you know, I want to put pavers. You know, it's going to exceed the amount of that grass versus concrete. So they have to pay $500. You have the attorney, also the person or the company that, I don't want to mention names, but the consultant that is there on behalf of the city. So now you're paying a heck of a lot more than $500. You know,
It's costing the city more
yeah,
money.
it's costing the city a lot of money. And sometimes they don't make decisions the first meeting, so they have to come back. Well, guess what? We're still being charged twice. So that's one of the things that, you know, we talked about, you know, improving the process. So what I would recommend is we can actually put something together, like say maybe a process sheet, and to say, okay, for this particular, like say, scenario, it would have to go to in front of council. But again, we have to look at the ordinance, make sure that we're not violating the ordinance. We might have to go back, even the ordinance, you know, we have to go revise it. We have to go 2 readings, you know, before anything's changed. So you guys can say it as a council, you know, what items you want to, if you're not in agreement with the ordinance, you know, we can revisit that. But as mentioned, you know, anytime you deviate from whatever, let's say if you're applying for rezoning any particular area, then it does, obviously has to go in front of council. And, we've seen it for the last 4 years.
Yeah, I know, Mr. Mayor, I've had conversations with you, and I've also heard you speak at the Tale of the Two Cities. And one of the things that you mentioned is that, obviously we don't want in our city the wild, wild west where everybody does whatever they want to do, needless to say. So I know you're not in favor of that. But at the same time, I know you're pro, as I am, pro-business, to make sure that businesses, we are business-friendly, and we want businesses to be open in the area. We don't want no shut down or boarded up businesses. And we want to encourage businesses to come here. And I can tell you for myself, what I've heard for years and years and years is we are, as a city, business friendly. It's a lot easier to go through us to get something done for a business versus a lot of cities, in the vicinity. So that's good, but also we don't want to add so much red tape where we discourage people from coming forward to open businesses in our city.
No, and I agree with you. And again, we have our city engineer he works for the city, so his best interest is the city. And we've had, there's property that is being developed right now. It passed through this one particular company, and it was not done right. So we had to go back and revisit that site, even though it cost the investor over $100,000 to make some modification, but they're willing to pay that amount. But that's why we have a city engineer, to make sure that nothing, everything will be accountable. Is make sure that it's being done right. And I agree with you. We definitely don't want the Wild West, people doing whatever they want. So
well, you had mentioned at the Tale of Two Cities, as I recall. You said you want to make it kind of like a one-stop plan, preferably for a resident that comes in and wants to open a particular business, to streamline the process where we're not letting them do whatever they want to do, but you mentioned you want it to where they go to one spot and one spot only, and that takes them through the whole process. So it eliminates a lot of the confusion that some residents have when they come in to open up a business, like, where do you start? That's why I had Gary start by mentioning what a planning commission is and what the zoning board is, so that people know, just to get an idea where to start. But I know you're trying to streamline it, and I commend you for that. Were you all set? Okay.
Yeah, and thank you, Council Chair. And that's, again, with process sheets, that's one, good point that you just mentioned. One of the things that I talked about at the Tales of Two Cities, to have process sheets. If anybody wants to start a business in the city, they can just come to the city, or they can go on the website, download the form, say, okay, here's step one, this is what I need.
It gives them the checklist.
Yeah, so they know exactly what to do, because even myself, walking in the hallways, people stop me, it's like, hey, I need to do this, what's the process?
Right.
It's kind of confusing.
And in the past, they were bouncing, I know, from one department to another, and it creates a lot of confusion, a lot of frustration, and then it makes them not want to sometimes do business here. And I know you're pro, to make it as smooth as possible, so thank you.
Thank you.
I heard somebody, okay, Councilman Constant, go ahead.
Thank you, Council Chair. And City Attorney Gary Miatke, maybe you could expand a little bit on some of the parts of the law that want to insulate, somebody submitting a site plan, making sure it's in the proper zone, making sure there's adequate room for fire protection, stacking lanes, off-street parking, to get through the specific requirements of those requirements first, before it gets, political, where everybody's saying, well, no, we shouldn't have another car wash there. Instead, we need a fine dining restaurant, or, talk about how the process is politics is, and arbitrary decisions are supposed to be kept out of the process.
Well, if I may, I'll try to be very brief about that, Councilman. Basically, the Planning Commission, when it ends up making decisions right now about, for example, special use approvals, is supposed to look at 9 factors. And that's how the decision is supposed to be made. It's supposed to be made by looking at those factors and those factors alone, and making a decision that's based on really the merits of the decision. It's not really a political decision. And I think that's part of the reason why this was done. I was not the person who drafted the ordinance. I believe that Mr. Roberts and his firm had drafted the zoning ordinance, and that was the thinking behind it. Even though I know Councilman Muscat had indicated that part of his concern is that Planning Commission is not electable and not necessarily accountable to the public in the same way that you as the city council are. But I think that was part of the thinking that these are technical decisions. They're going to be left to a body that's going to look at things more technically. I hope that answers your question, Councilman.
Yes, and then there are only certain uses, car washes, I forget what the ordinance says, that the city council has to also okay. But typically, if the planning commission gives the go-ahead, then the council says okay and the developer can proceed. Isn't that correct?
Well, special uses are actually approved by the Planning Commission, not just reviewed or conditionally approved. So that would be something that would be decided by the Planning Commission as opposed to the council itself.
But there's
the council,
in the ordinance,
again, only has like 4 things that it approves.
car washes and then
No,
it's not
I'm sorry,
specific car
Councilman.
washes.
But, I'm sorry that I believe car washes are a special land use and would not end up having to go back for approval. I could stand corrected. I haven't been dealing with the zoning issues for a number of years. If the building director could correct me if I'm wrong, but my understanding is that this would be, it's a special land use. It would end up being approved by the Planning Commission, and that decision would be correct. Again, only in terms of the council, the only things that it generally is involved in are review and approval of planned development and conditional rezoning proposals. Okay. So like, for example, someone came in and said, hey, we want to put in a manufacturing place in this area. And it's like, hey, that's not zoned for that. Well, they could potentially, you as a body would deal with the conditional rezoning proposal based on that development, or a planned development, which would be something akin to what's being envisioned for the Van Born corridor.
Okay, Eric, Madam Clerk, if you could let Eric in.
Eric?
Yes, Rick, you got both names. Rick.
Yep.
Okay, Rick, got a question for you. On the Planning Commission, whatever particular subject lines that they go through at that particular date, okay? Who is the decision maker at that particular point that says, okay, well, now this has to go in front of the city council? Who's making that decision at that point? Because one of the concerns about some of the council members is they hadn't seen stuff come in front of us in a while. And even myself, I could recollect it's been quite a while since I've seen something coming from the Planning Commission. So who makes that determination during the meeting, like, okay, this should go in front of the council body now for final approval? Who's making that decision?
It would only be if it was like a zoning change or a special variance, then it would go to council for final approval.
Okay, so it's the...
That would be the recommendation to have council approve it.
Okay, so at that particular point, it would be our attorney, Mark Roberts, or is it the Planning Commission Chair?
who's the new city attorney for that?
It would be our ordinance that would say it, because if it's a zoning change, it already says that it has to be finally approved by council.
Okay.
But if a building's allowed in an area, Bob keeps saying the car wash, if that was zoned for a car wash and they put it there, the Planning Commission could approve it and it move forward without going to anybody.
Okay.
Council
Right.
Chair, I think,
Thank you. Councilman, go ahead.
what happened when I was in there, it was included in a motion, that it was subject to go back to city council for something, or go to zoning for something, you know, or we're not going to approve this unless someone else looks into it and approves it. There was one instance I remember, I'm not going to mention, there was a investor that bought 4 houses on each side of, on one street, and 4 houses on another, off of Warren, I think it was, and for parking, for his parking lot. And maybe it was three houses on each side. But anyway, the person that lived in that 4th house was 4 houses away from any business. Now they had a 6-foot brick wall next to their driveway where they used to have their neighbor's house. And we debated it back and forth, and there were some of us, you know, because me and a few others were strictly, you know, representing the residents of Dearborn Heights. And we said, we don't like this, and we recommended to City Council that it be denied on the conditions that these people came, they had a whole block of people, signatures, and City Council came back to us, they said, well, give us another recommendation to solve this issue. And it came back, and the applicant, we met with the applicant again, and the last lot, we put the 6-foot wall in the middle of that lot and gave that last homeowner, or the first homeowner now, 20 feet between the driveway and that wall. And that was something, there was several, you know, either way, whoever gets final say on this, I'm just telling you the way it was. When we made motions, if someone made a motion, say, I recommend approval right away, Corporation Council would stop us. No, you're recommending approval. Everyone. If Mark Roberts was here right now, he'd go along with me on that. Everyone was, we recommend approval to City Council that we approve, deny, or approve subject to. But that's what it was. There was issues that concerned, you know, that they weren't in a rule or anything somewhere, but it was the residents that came forward, and we worked it out with City Council before the City Council finally approved it.
Okay, thank you, Councilman. Councilor Geary.
Council Chair, if I may, there was the change in the ordinance took place in July 24, 2007. So it would have been sometime during Councilman Wenzel's tenure on the Planning Commission that these things changed, as, you know, the building director and I have laid out. I mean, you know, there's not a lot of things right now that the City Council controls with respect to this. City Council could change the ordinance, but then you have to deal with whether or not you should do so.
Okay, thank you, Councilor. Is there any other questions from council members?
Council Chair?
Councilman Ahmed, go ahead.
I have a question about the master plan we're working on. So after the master plan is adopted, does just the planning has to approve, or it comes back to City Council for approval?
Who are you asking the question to?
Maybe Rick? Maybe
It does go back
Mr.
to
Deeb?
council for
Right,
approval.
okay, Councilor, I'm going to have our Mayor Bazzi answer. Go ahead, Mayor.
It will go to council approval as well. You guys remember a few months ago when I asked the council members, about maybe like 7 months ago, if you have any ideas what you want to do, what your vision is for the city, if you can put those things together and send them to us. So as you remember, we put on an agenda to send it out for bid for the master plan. So we'd like to get the input once we get a company on board to work on our master plan. And but I do want the council's approval, and it does have to go in front of you guys for approval.
Does it go in front of planning? Does it go in front of planning first? They approve, then comes to
It does
council?
go in front of them. They will have to give a lot of input as well.
The Planning Commission does the master
Yeah,
plan,
yeah.
basically. Yeah. And then
Okay.
they present it to City Council for approval, yeah.
Okay, thank you. Well, I'm going to go to people on Zoom in a second. Yes, Councilman Robert Council, go
Two
ahead.
quick questions. Number one, I think, yeah, flow chart is a real good idea. And then the mayor had mentioned there's a new attorney for the planning commission, or is that not solidified yet?
Hasn't solidified yet.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Councilor. Councilman, I'm sorry. Okay, so we're gonna wrap up with the city council members, and then I'm gonna go to Zoom, and then also any public that has any questions or public comments.
Okay.
Go ahead, Councilman.
Just one last, I think it's a little bit confusing, because like I said, whichever way we're supposed to do it, that's the way I want to do it, right? But, under duties of the planning commission, C5, it says, plan, development, and review. That's one of one of the duties of the planning commission. Plan, development, review. The planning commission shall be responsible for holding hearings, reviewing all applications for plan development projects, and for making recommendations to city council to grant approval subject to conditions, or denial of proposed plan development. I mean, if there's two different things in here on what authorities they have or what they should do, let's just straighten it out and get it done,
Okay, so I'm going to give our Councilor Gary Miyake a quick, if you don't mind, if you could give him a quick answer on that. And then I'm going to go ahead and go to the public comments and including anybody on Zoom and here in the audience. Go ahead, Councilor.
Right. You can see, for example, sub 2 of the same section that Councilman Wenzel talked about says site plan approval. That goes to the Planning Commission. Special use approval goes to the Planning Commission. And so conditional reviewing, rezoning review and planned development review, which Councilman Wenzel, the last one, just read from, are things where the Planning Commission reviews but then makes recommendations to the council. But those are relatively narrow things, namely the planned development review has to do with planned developments, like the Van Born corridor where you have a pattern of development taking place. That's the type of thing that's being discussed under that portion of that section of the ordinance. Thank you.
Okay, I thank you for the clarification, because on something like that, I tell you, for one, absolutely, if we're going to have a plan for the whole corridor, definitely I'd want us as a city council body to be involved in that process. Okay, thank you, Councilor Gary Miyake. With no other questions from council members, any questions or public comments in the audience? All right, I see none. Our Madam Clerk, if you don't mind, if you could let in people that have any comments in the audience, I'm sorry, on Zoom.
I do have one,
Okay, go ahead.
if they could state their name and...
Yes, so whoever's coming on Zoom and you have a public comment, please make sure you state your name, the city that you reside in, and the street name. Please do not give out the exact address unless you personally prefer to, but we don't need it. Thank you.
Okay, I asked IHD to unmute.
Council Cherry?
Yes, go ahead, Councilor.
And perhaps you should note that it's 2 minutes in terms of comments.
Correct.
Oh, I better get one.
I'm not sure if it's on this one, though, Gary, because
For a
it's
study session, yes.
Even a study session? Okay.
Yes.
Okay, so you'll have 2 minutes.
And,
Okay, IHP, she's trying, our clerk is trying to get you to unmute.
so they have to unmute from their...
You got to unmute from your end.
I think Zoom's got to fix that. We're able to unmute them.
IHP, are you still on? Unmute on your end, if you could hear us. I don't see an IHP.
IHD.
IHD?
Yeah. As indeed.
I don't see it.
I'm going to try it over on this way, okay?
Oh, okay, I see it. Okay, so let's go to is there another one? I see it.
There is another one.
Okay, let's go to the next person. In IHD, if you end up unmuting, stay unmuted,
Okay,
please.
He's unmuted. He's unmuted.
He's unmuted? Okay, go ahead.
Hello?
Yep, there he goes.
That's Hassan.
That's Hassan Saad, that's different. Okay, so that's the next person? Okay, so go ahead, you have 2 minutes. Please state your name, street you live on, and the city that you live in.
Hassan Saab, John Daly, Dearborn Heights, Michigan. I just wanted to give my public comment about last week's meeting. about how disrespectful the police department was every time one of you elected officials, especially the mayor, talked.
Council Chair?
Yes, Counselor.
The public comment for planning commission or for study sessions is actually supposed to be on topic, specifically on that topic, as opposed to things in general.
Okay.
Per the council.
I understand
So,
it
I mean-
another way, but I'll respect
That's
your
public
opinion.
comment, it's public comment. You guys
As far as I know, it
no
can
say
be-
anything about public comment.
Yeah, as far as I know, Counselor, and just correct me if I'm wrong, and Hassan, that's not going to count against your time.
Okay.
Madam Clerk, I assume you're keeping time, correct? Or can somebody, yeah, please. So, Counselor, and please correct me if I'm wrong, the way I understand it, during public comments, somebody can come up and speak about whatever they want to speak of. So is that the case or not?
Not for study sessions.
Not for study
For general meetings, yes,
Okay.
it's absolutely, that's why it's a 2-minute limit
Okay,
for.
no problem.
For
I
study
respect that.
sessions.
Now, for
So
those in
Mr.
the audi- okay, I'm
Saab
sorry,
could
go ahead.
speak at the next meeting.
Okay.
You know, and
Right.
speak on whatever topic he
Right.
feels he needs to.
So, for those in the
I mean, you
audience,
could let him do so too, Council Chair.
I didn't hear the last sentence. What was that?
I'm sorry, you could allow him to do so if you wanted, but it would be inconsistent with the public comment rules, specifically having
rules-
to do with study sessions.
Yeah, if it's the rules, we'll respect the rules, but I also am a believer in free speech. So, Mr. Saab, what I'm going to do is, I'm going to continue with comments in regards to this particular item. Right after that, we're going to have a little break, and right after that, we're going to have our regular special council meeting. At that special council meeting, there will be a public comment section. Actually, I'm looking at the agenda, there's really nothing. We're just going to do the Pledge of Allegiance, call of the roll call, and then we're going to go pretty much right into public comments. So you'll have an opportunity to speak then. If you don't mind, Mr.
Sounds good.
Saab, I have to respect the rules.
No problem.
Okay, thank you. That should be, I mean, it shouldn't be too long. Okay, is there anybody else that has any comments in regards to this particular study session subject?
I'm going to try IHD again.
Is there anybody, okay, IHD, are you still on?
Yep. I'm still here, but
You got to unmute yourself. You're still muted. I'm looking at it. Okay.
and I've done it both ways I can.
Okay. So IHD, I'm going to give you another 5 more seconds just out of respect. And if you don't get unmuted and you still want to speak during the regular council, the special council meeting coming up, you are able to speak, including on stuff in regards to this planning commission study session. So you will not be muted, but unfortunately, because of technical difficulties, I've always wanted to say that, we can't get you on. Okay, so he's not been able to unmute, so we'll go ahead and go to the next person, please.
That's all I see.
Okay. Thank you very much. With no other questions, we're going to go ahead and end this study session. And for those in the audience, we're going to take, Councilman, yes, go ahead.
What's the conclusion of the study session? Are we going to, what's our next step, or what can we let the residents know what we're going to do next?
Well, I think our Councilor Gary Miyake, with what he gave us, it kind of clarified. Maybe, and I'm just thinking out loud here, Counselor, if maybe you could put something together that maybe you could give it to us as a city council and to the planning commission, just clarifying it in plain, simple terms.
If I may,
Yes,
as
go
a
ahead.
suggestion, Council Chair.
Go ahead.
My sense would be you should add this as an item of new business and just have a vote on it in terms of what direction the council as a body wants to take, whether or not the council wishes to end up having greater authority over certain things that the Planning Commission does right now.
Okay.
Then you could end up having that vote. I would prepare things. They would have to end up being referred over to the Planning Commission, because the Planning Commission has to end up reviewing any sort of proposed ordinance changes having to do with the zoning ordinance before they can come back to the council. And then it could go to the Planning Commission, be discussed, looked at. They could formulate something based on whatever perhaps I've drafted, and then it could end up coming back for ultimate adoption. If, however, your body says, look, we're not interested in making this this proposed change, then you could end up doing that, and then I wouldn't end up having to prepare something with the idea that it might not actually be how your honorable body wants to end up addressing this.
Okay, if I may something, Councilman, I'm gonna let you go ahead and go. Then if we are gonna add it, I don't suggest we add it on new business right now at the next meeting. It's just too early to make that big of a change. So what I would suggest, and if all of my fellow council members agree, and I think it'd be the best way to go, we'd put it on the next council agenda, so this way you'll have an opportunity as council members to do whatever research, calls, look into it, discussions with whoever you want to, and then we'll put it on the agenda, and at that particular point, we'll vote on it if we as a body feel we want to make that change. But go ahead, Councilman Tom Wenzel. And this will be the last, I'm sorry, this will be the last comment, and then this will end the study session.
I'd like to also have Corporation Counsel supply us with the, that change that he talked about in 2007, I believe it was, where he said things were changed then. Can we see that change
Okay.
or whatever that is? So we know what we had before and what we changed to.
Good idea.
That's a good idea.
Good idea. So, Councilor Gary Miyake, if you don't mind providing that via email to the council members?
Okay.
Go ahead, Mo, quickly.
And I'm sorry, Gary, if you could also put something together, basically the steps of what would have to take if we want to make any types of adjustments so that the council is all aware, including the planning commission. So if you can break down those steps for us before the next city council meeting, before the vote was there, so that we can have that. Thank you.
Excuse me, you mean before the next meeting where it would be on the agenda, not the next
Correct,
meeting?
correct.
Okay, all right.
As soon as
Okay.
possible.
Okay. No other questions or concerns? And Madam Chair, you couldn't get IHD on, right?
I could not, I don't even,
Madam Clerk, I'm sorry.
I don't, they're gone. They're not
Okay,
on here.
no problem. So at this particular point, we're going to take, it's right now at 6:30. We're going to resume our regular council meeting at 6:45. And then at that particular point, for those in the audience that wanted to speak, I'm not blocking you from speaking, you'll be able to speak at the special meeting of the Dearborn Heights City Council, starting in 15 minutes. Mr. Mayor?
It would be not on the first or second for agenda items. There's nothing on the agenda items. So it'll be the second public hearing, right?
I'm
Right,
thinking
yeah.
2/22.
Yeah.
Yeah, the date, yeah, right, that's what I'm saying. The regular
Yeah.
Yeah.
more traditional council meeting on the second and fourth of the month.
Public at the end.
Yeah, the one,
Yeah.
right. He's talking about adding it on as a new item of new business, and that would be on a regular council meeting session, not this particular one.
No, he was
Yes.
saying that you can't have someone speak at the beginning because it's not on an agenda item. They'd have to wait
No, no, it would
until
not be at the
public
beginning.
comments.
It's going to be during public comments.
Yeah,
For
at the-
today, you
at
mean?
the end.
Yeah, absolutely,
Yeah,
during
yeah.
public comments at the end, correct.
Yeah, 14.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
Thank you.
Okay, so this ends the study session. Thank you. We'll resume at 6:45.